The wrench slipped from my hand, clattering against the concrete floor of the garage, the sound swallowed by the humid Virginia air. I froze, my pulse hammering, as Riley's breath brushed my cheek, her face inches from mine. For a moment, the world was just her hazel eyes, flecked with gold, and the unspoken question hanging between us. It was supposed to be a simple favor. Riley, my neighbor of 3 months, had knocked on my door that morning, her vintage Mustang coughing like it was on its last legs. "Ellie, you're good with cars, right?" she'd asked, her voice carrying that easy confidence I'd come to admire from a distance. I wasn't a mechanic, but I'd spent enough summers in my dad's shop to know my way around an engine. So, I'd followed her across the street to her driveway, toolbox in hand, expecting nothing more than an hour of tinkering under the hood. Riley's garage smelled of oil and sun-warmed metal, a familiar comfort that grounded me as we worked. She was 26, a year older than me, with long dark hair she kept in a messy bun, and a laugh that made my chest ache in ways I couldn't explain. I'd seen her around the neighborhood, jogging in the early mornings, waving from her porch, but we'd never been this close. Not until now, crouched side by side, our shoulders brushing as we traced a stubborn leak in the fuel line. "You sure you're not a pro?" Riley teased, her voice pulling me back. She was leaning over the engine, her tank top streaked with grease, her fingers deft as she pointed out a loose clamp. I laughed, shaking my head, but my focus was slipping. Her arm grazed mine again, and I felt it, a spark, sharp and undeniable, like a circuit completing. I tried to focus on the car. The Mustang was a beauty, a 67 model with curves that deserved better than the neglect it had suffered. Riley had bought it cheap at an auction, determined to fix it up herself, though she admitted she was clueless about anything beyond changing a tire. "I like a challenge," she'd said with a grin, and I believed her. There was something fearless about Riley, something that made me want to know her in ways I wasn't ready to admit. We'd been at it for hours, the late afternoon sun slanting through the garage window, casting long shadows across the floor. I was explaining the fuel pump when she leaned closer, her shoulder pressing against mine, her breath warm against my skin. "You're really good at this, Ellie," she said softly, and I swear my heart stopped. Her eyes held mine, and for a moment, I forgot the wrench, the car, the world outside. There was only her, and the question in her gaze that I was too scared to answer. I pulled back, my face burning, and mumbled something about needing another tool. Riley didn't push, but I felt her watching me as I rummaged through my toolbox, my hands shaking. I'd spent years building walls around my heart, ever since I left home at 18, running from a town that didn't know how to love someone like me. I was out, sure, but I kept my distance. Neighbors were just neighbors. Riley was supposed to stay that way. But as I glanced back at her, leaning against the Mustang, her expression soft and unreadable, I knew I was in trouble. This wasn't just about fixing a car. Something was shifting, and I wasn't sure I could stop it, or if I even wanted to. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. We fixed the fuel line, got the engine purring, and celebrated with cold sodas from her fridge. But every time our eyes met, that spark flared again, and I felt the weight of it settle in my chest. Riley talked about her job as a graphic designer, her dreams of restoring the Mustang to its former glory, her life before moving to this quiet suburb. I listened, nodding, but my mind was elsewhere, tangled in the what-ifs I'd spent years avoiding. As I packed up my tools, the sun dipping low, Riley touched my arm. "Hey, Ellie," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Thanks for today. Not just for the car." Her fingers lingered, and I felt that spark again, stronger this time, pulling me towards something I wasn't sure I was ready for. I managed to smile, my throat tight. "Anytime," I said, and meant it more than I should. As I walked back to my house, the streetlights flickering on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left something behind in that garage, something I wasn't sure I could ever get back. The next morning, I woke with Riley's face burned into my mind, her hazel eyes haunting me like a song I couldn't forget. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee cooling in my hands, watching her jog past in the early light, her stride steady and sure. I told myself to let it go, to chalk yesterday up to a moment of weakness, but my heart wasn't listening. Work kept me busy, freelance coding projects that let me hide behind a screen, away from complications like feelings. But by noon, I was restless, replaying every second in that garage. The way Riley's laugh had softened when she looked at me. The way her hand had brushed mine, deliberate or not. I was spiraling, and I hated it. I'd built a life here in Richmond, safe and solitary, after leaving behind a family that saw my identity as a phase to be fixed. I didn't do attachments. Not anymore. Yet, when Riley knocked on my door that afternoon, holding a tray of homemade cookies, I felt my resolve crack. Peace offering for yesterday's grease stains, she said, grinning, but her eyes were searching, like she was testing the waters. I invited her in, my apartment suddenly feeling too small, too exposed. We sat on my couch, the cookies untouched, and talked about nothing, weather, the neighborhood, the Mustang. But the air was heavy with what we weren't saying. "You ever feel like you're running from something?" Riley asked out of nowhere, her voice quiet. She was staring at her hands, her fingers twisting together. I froze, caught off guard by the shift. All the time, I admitted before I could stop myself. Her eyes met mine, and there it was again. That spark, that pull. She told me about her ex, a woman who'd broken her heart in Chicago, leaving her to pick up the pieces and move here for a fresh start. "I thought I was done with love," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But then I met you." My breath caught. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I reached for her hand, my fingers brushing hers, and the world tilted. We sat there, silent, our hands clasped, the weight of her confession settling between us. It was terrifying and exhilarating, like stepping off a cliff without knowing if you'd fall or fly. The next few days were a blur of stolen moments. Riley started texting me, little things at first, jokes about the Mustang, pictures of her sketches. But soon, we were spending evenings together, her on my couch or me in her garage, the car an excuse to be close. I taught her how to change spark plugs. She showed me her art, vibrant designs that felt like glimpses into her soul. Every touch, every glance, was a step closer to something I couldn't name. But fear lingered. I'd been burned before, by family, by a first love who couldn't handle the weight of who I was. Riley seemed different, but what if I was wrong? What if this was just another heartbreak waiting to happen? I kept those thoughts buried, but they gnawed at me, especially when Riley's ex started texting her again. I saw the notifications light up her phone one night, and though she ignored them, the doubt crept in. One evening, as we sat on her porch, the summer air thick with cicadas, Riley turned to me. "Ellie, what are we doing?" she asked, her voice raw. I wanted to tell her I was falling for her, that she was breaking down every wall I'd built, but the words stuck. Instead, I kissed her, soft at first, then desperate, like I could pour everything I couldn't say into that moment. She kissed me back, her hands tangling in my hair, and for a second, I believed we could be something real. But as we pulled apart, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, her face clouding, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. "It's nothing," she said, but her voice was tight. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but the doubt was there, sharp and cold. As I walked home that night, the stars blurring above, I wondered if I was brave enough to keep going, or if I'd already lost her before we'd even begun. The kiss lingered like a bruise, tender and impossible to ignore. I spent the next day in a haze, coding on autopilot, my mind replaying Riley's lips on mine, the way her breath had hitched. But the shadow of her ex's text loomed, a crack in the fragile thing we were building. Riley invited me over that evening, her voice bright over the phone, but I heard the undercurrent of something unspoken. When I arrived, the garage was lit with string lights, the Mustang gleaming under their glow. "Thought we could work on the brakes tonight," she said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. We dove in, the rhythm of our work familiar, but the silence between us was new, heavy with questions neither of us asked. Halfway through, her phone buzzed again. She ignored it, but I saw her jaw tighten. "It's her, isn't it?" I asked, unable to stop myself. Riley sighed, setting down her wrench. "Yeah," she admitted. "Cass. She's been texting all week. Says she made a mistake." My stomach twisted, but I kept my voice steady. "Do you believe her?" Riley looked at me, her eyes raw. "I don't know," she said. "She broke me, Ellie. But I can't just erase her." Her honesty cut, but it also anchored me. She wasn't hiding, not from me. I reached for her hand, and she let me take it, her fingers trembling. "I don't want to lose this," she whispered, and I knew she meant us. We didn't work on the car after that. Instead, we sat on the garage floor, backs against the Mustang, and talked. She told me about Cass, how they'd met in college, how Cass had been her first love, how their breakup had left her doubting herself. I shared my own scars, my parents' rejection, the small town that felt like a cage. It was the most honest we'd been, and it felt like a lifeline, pulling us closer even as the past threatened to pull us apart. The next week was a tightrope walk. Riley stopped responding to Cass's texts, but I could see the weight of them in her quiet moments. I tried to be patient, to give her space, but every day felt like a gamble. We kept working on the Mustang, each repair a small victory, a way to anchor ourselves. One night, as we tested the brakes, Riley laughed, a real, unguarded laugh, and I felt hope flare. "Your trouble, Ellie," she said, nudging my shoulder, and I grinned, my heart lighter than it had been in days. But trouble found us. Cass showed up on Riley's doorstep a week later, unannounced. I was there, helping with the car's wiring, when the doorbell rang. Riley's face paled as she checked the peephole. "It's her," she said, her voice barely audible. My heart sank, but I nodded. "Go talk to her," I said, though every part of me wanted to beg her to stay. I waited in the garage, my hands gripping a screwdriver, listening to the muffled voices through the wall. I couldn't make out words, but Riley's tone was sharp, then soft, then sharp again. When she came back, her eyes were red, but she managed to smile. "She's gone," she said. "For good." I wanted to ask what happened, but the relief in her voice was enough for now. She stepped closer, her hand finding mine, and we stood there, the garage quiet except for our breathing. That night, we didn't kiss. We didn't need to. We worked on the car until midnight, our hands moving in sync, and I felt something shift, a trust building, fragile but real. As I left, Riley hugged me, her arms tight around me, and whispered, "I'm choosing you." My heart stopped again, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was hope. Riley's words echoed in my head for days. "I'm choosing you." They were a promise, but promises could break, and I'd learned that the hard way. Still, I let myself lean into her, let the walls I'd built start to crumble as we spent more time together, the Mustang our quiet refuge. We were inseparable now, stealing moments between work and life. Mornings at the coffee shop down the street, evenings in her garage, nights on her couch watching old movies. Riley's laugh was my new favorite sound, and the way she looked at me, like I was enough, made me believe I could be. But doubt lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. What if Cass came back? What if Riley changed her mind? One Saturday, we took the Mustang for its first real drive since we'd started fixing it. The engine roared to life, smooth and strong, and Riley hooped as we pulled onto the open road. The Virginia countryside stretched out, fields golden under the late summer sun, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. She reached for my hand, her fingers lacing through mine, and I let myself believe this could last. But perfection never lasts. That evening, back at her place, Riley got a call from her mom. I could tell from her face it wasn't good news. She stepped outside to take it, and when she came back, her eyes were distant. "My parents want me to visit," she said.
They don't know about me.
"About us." My stomach dropped. I knew that fear, the dread of telling the people who raised you who you really are. I'd lived it. "Do you want to tell them?" I asked, my voice careful. Riley shook her head, her hands twisting in her lap. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "They're traditional. I don't think they'd understand." I nodded, swallowing the ache in my chest. I wanted to be her strength, but I was terrified of pushing too hard, of losing her to the weight of her family's expectations. The next few weeks were a balancing act. Riley was quieter, her smiles less frequent, and I could feel her pulling away, not from me but from the decision looming over her. I tried to be there, to keep things light, but the garage felt different now, the Mustang a reminder of how fragile this was. One night, as we worked on the upholstery, she broke down. "I'm scared, Ellie," she said, tears streaking her face. "What if they hate me?" I held her, my own fears clawing at me, but I pushed them down. "They might not understand," I said, my voice steady. "But you're still you. And you're incredible." She clung to me, her sobs quieting, and I wished I could protect her from the world. But I knew I couldn't, not from this. We decided to take a break from the car, to give her space to think. I hated it, but I understood. I spent those days alone, my apartment too quiet, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if she chose her family over herself? Over us? I tried to distract myself with work, but every line of code felt empty without her. Then, one evening, Riley showed up at my door, her eyes bright with something new. "I told them," she said, her voice trembling but strong.
"I told them about me. About you."
My heart stopped, waiting for the rest. "And?" I asked, barely breathing. She smiled, a real smile, and stepped closer.
"They're not there yet," she said.
"But I am. I'm here, Ellie. With you." She kissed me, and the world fell away, leaving only us, standing in my doorway, choosing each other. Riley's kiss in my doorway was a turning point, a promise we both wanted to keep. But life doesn't pause for promises, and the weeks that followed tested us in ways I hadn't expected. Her parents' reaction hung over us, a quiet storm that hadn't fully broken. They hadn't disowned her, but their silence was its own kind of rejection, and I could see it wearing on her. We threw ourselves back into the Mustang, finishing the interior and polishing the chrome until it gleamed. The work grounded us, gave us something to hold onto when words weren't enough. Riley was different now, stronger, but guarded, like she was bracing for the next blow. I wanted to fix it, to make her smile the way she had that first day in the garage, but I didn't know how. One night, as we sat in the finished car, the leather seats creaking under us, she turned to me. "I want to take you somewhere," she said, her voice soft but sure. The next day, we drove to the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Mustang humming under us, the road winding through forests ablaze with early fall colors. She parked at a lookout point, the valley stretching below us, and we sat on the hood, the metal warm against our backs. "This is where I came when I first realized I was gay," she said, her eyes on the horizon. "I was 19, scared out of my mind. This place, it made me feel like I could breathe." I reached for her hand, my heart aching for the girl she'd been, alone with her truth. "You're not alone now," I said, and she smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. For a moment, the world was just us, the wind, and the endless sky. But reality crept back. Her parents called again, asking her to visit, to talk things over. Riley hesitated, but I could see she needed closure, even if it hurt. "I'll go with you," I offered, surprising myself. She looked at me, her eyes wide, then nodded. "Okay," she whispered, and I felt the weight of her trust, heavy and precious. The drive to her parents' house in Roanoke was quiet, the Mustang's rumble the only sound. When we arrived, her mom greeted us politely, but her dad's handshake was stiff, his eyes avoiding mine. Dinner was tense, their questions about my life, my job, my family, feeling like a test I couldn't pass. Riley held my hand under the table, her grip tight, and I clung to that small act of defiance. Things unraveled when her dad brought up choices. "We just want what's best for you, Riley," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. I felt her tense beside me, but she didn't back down. "This is who I am," she said, her voice steady. "Ellie's not a choice. She's my truth." The room went silent, and I saw the pain in her parents' eyes, but also the strength in hers. We left soon after, the air between us charged with unspoken pride. Back in the Mustang, Riley cried, and I held her, the night wrapping around us. "I'm proud of you," I said, and she kissed me, her tears mixing with mine. We drove home in silence, her hand in mine, the road stretching ahead like a promise we were still learning to keep. The Mustang became our sanctuary, a place where the world's weight couldn't touch us. After Roanoke, Riley was different, freer, like she'd shed a skin she'd outgrown. But freedom comes with its own challenges, and we were about to face ours. We decided to celebrate the car's completion with a road trip. Just us, the Mustang, and the open road. We planned a week along the coast, from Virginia Beach to the Outer Banks, chasing sunsets and the promise of something new. The first day was magic, sand in our hair, Riley's laugh louder than the waves, her hand warm in mine as we walked the shore. I'd never felt so alive, so seen. But on the third day, trouble found us. We stopped at a small diner in a coastal town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. The waitress was friendly, but the looks from the other tables weren't. Two women holding hands wasn't part of their scenery. Riley noticed it too, her smile tightening, but she squeezed my hand, refusing to let go. "Let them stare," she whispered, and I loved her for it. Things escalated when a man at the counter muttered something under his breath, loud enough for us to hear. Riley's jaw clenched, but she stayed calm, paying the bill and leading me out. In the parking lot, he followed, his words sharper now, cutting into us like knives. I felt my old instincts kick in, run, hide, disappear, but Riley stood her ground. "We're not your problem," she said, her voice steady, her eyes locked on his. He backed off, muttering, but the encounter left us shaken. In the Mustang, Riley was quiet, her hands gripping the wheel. "I'm sorry," I said, hating how small I felt. She shook her head, reaching for my hand. "Don't be," she said. "This is us, Ellie. We don't hide." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of fear. That night, in a motel by the sea, we held each other, the sound of the waves drowning out the world's noise. The rest of the trip was ours again, laughter, stolen kisses, the Mustang carrying us through moments we'd never forget. But the diner stayed with me, a reminder of the world we lived in. Back home, we faced new challenges. Riley's parents reached out, wanting to try again, but their efforts felt half-hearted, conditional. My own family, still distant, sent a letter that cut deeper than I'd expected, accusing me of choosing a life they couldn't accept. Through it all, Riley was my anchor. We worked on smaller projects now, her sketches, my coding, but the garage remained our heart. One night, as we sat in the Mustang, the radio playing softly, she turned to me. "I want a future with you," she said, her voice steady. No matter what. My heart stopped, not from fear but from the weight of her love. I kissed her, pouring everything into it, my fears, my hopes, my truth. The idea of a future with Riley was intoxicating, but it came with questions we couldn't ignore. Where would we live? How would we build a life in a world that didn't always make room for us? The Mustang, now fully restored, felt like a symbol of what we could do together, take something broken and make it whole. We started dreaming bigger. Riley talked about opening an art studio, a place where she could teach and create. I toyed with the idea of starting a tech consultancy, using my coding skills to build something of my own. We'd lie in the Mustang at night, the seats reclined, talking about a house with a garage big enough for 2 cars, a life where we could be ourselves without apology. But dreams don't pay the bills, and reality hit hard. Riley's graphic design work slowed, and my freelance gigs weren't enough to cover both our rents. We talked about moving in together, but the idea scared me, not because I didn't want it, but because it felt so permanent, so vulnerable. What if we failed? What if love wasn't enough? One evening, as we worked on a new project, a custom paint job for the Mustang, Riley got a call. A gallery in DC wanted to showcase her work, a huge opportunity. But it meant leaving Richmond, at least for a while. "Come with me," she said, her eyes pleading. I hesitated, my fears bubbling up. My life was here, safe and small. Could I uproot it for her? The next few days were tense. I buried myself in work, avoiding the decision, but Riley wouldn't let me hide. "Ellie, talk to me," she said one night, cornering me in the garage. "Are you in this or not?" Her voice was raw, and I saw the fear in her eyes. Fear that I'd pull away. I took a breath, my heart racing. "I'm in," I said. "I'm scared, but I'm in." She kissed me, and the world steadied. We made plans to move to DC, pooling our savings for a small apartment. The Mustang would come with us, a piece of home. But as we packed, my family reached out again, this time with an ultimatum: come home and fix myself, or be cut off for good. I read the letter, my hands shaking, and Riley held me as I cried. "You don't need them," she said fiercely. "You have me." The move was chaotic, but we did it together, the Mustang loaded with boxes, our laughter louder than the engine. In DC, Riley's gallery show was a success, her art drawing crowds that saw her the way I did, brilliant, fearless. I started pitching my tech ideas, landing a contract that gave us breathing room. We were building something, not just a life, but a legacy. Our new life in DC was messy, beautiful, ours. The apartment was small, the walls thin, but it was home because Riley was there. The Mustang sat in a rented garage, a reminder of where we started, a promise of where we could go. But the world doesn't stop testing you, even when you've found your truth. Riley's parents made small steps, awkward calls, tentative visits. My family stayed silent, a wound I learned to carry. We faced other challenges: whispers at Riley's gallery events, clients who hesitated when they saw us together. But we faced them as a team, our hands clasped, our hearts aligned. One spring evening, a year after we'd met, we took the Mustang for a drive. No destination, just us and the road. We ended up at a park, the cherry blossoms in bloom, their petals drifting like snow. Riley pulled me under a tree, her eyes bright with something I couldn't name. "Ellie," she said, her voice trembling, "I want forever with you." She pulled out a ring, simple and silver, and my heart stopped, not from fear but from joy. I said yes, tears streaming, and we kissed under the blossoms, the world fading away. The ring wasn't a solution to everything. It didn't erase the past or silence the doubters, but it was a promise. A promise to choose each other, every day, no matter what. Back in a Mustang, we sat in silence, her hand in mine, the engine idling. "We fixed more than a car, didn't we?" she said, her voice soft. I laughed, nodding, my heart full. We had. We'd fixed ourselves, our fears, our futures. The road ahead wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and we'd drive it together. The Mustang carrying us toward a life we'd built from love, courage, and a little bit of grease. As we drove home, the city lights blurring past, I realized something. Love doesn't erase the world's sharp edges, but it gives you someone to hold on to when they cut. Riley was that for me, and I was that for her. In that garage, we hadn't just fixed a car. We'd found each other, and that was the truest thing I'd ever known.